So as it was mentioned, we're your neighbor. We're just in Easton, right down the road. And we're there 5 days a week. And what we've always done is sold our paint in a very hands-on way. Instead of going into a store where we tell you don't open the tubes, we want you to squirt it out. And we want you to really see what we're so passionate about, which is the authenticity of the colors. And to try every day, even after all these years, to really be the true standard for what these colors should be. We don't believe in false equivalence. So in other words, Ellen was talking about earth colors. When the tube is labeled burnt sienna, that's what's in the tube. And unfortunately, in our culture, in our time of mass production and fast, everything real fast, there's no pigment police. So you're not always getting a genuine earth pigment. It could be a synthetic that's been weakened. So let me demonstrate that for you. Here's our burnt sienna. Let me get this real quick. And we have, I forgot to mention, we actually hand fill each and every tube. That allows us to make pigments that other brands can't do because they're too textured, or maybe they're problematic. And when you go to fill it, they want to clump up and you get all these air bubbles. But this is a very time-consuming 19th century process. And the result is the artist has a lot of freedom to be able to use these pigments in a way that's uniquely their own. So this is a real burnt sienna. In other words, it's natural brown earth. Here's another one that's imported from France that's a different particle size. So what that means is it reflects light differently, because in Europe the tradition was that paintings were displayed in dark church interiors. So it had to be able to be seen. So the paint was ground very coarsely. The pigments were ground coarsely. In the domestic pigments are ground a little more smoothly. And that's because the thing to remember too is pigments aren't made for artists. They're actually made for other industries, especially the domestic pigments. And so that's why they come and go, and that's why the consistency is geared for those other applications. But let me just show you. Unfortunately, there's no pigment police that says what's in the tube on the label has to be what's in the tube. So this is a transparent iron oxide that mimics a burnt sienna, but unfortunately it doesn't mix like one. And the whole reason you'd want to use an earth color is because you would have nuance and the ability to neutralize a mixture, whereas with a modern pigment, you're doing the opposite. You're enhancing the mixture. And it might be easier for the manufacturer to create paint from it, but it's far different. These are the natural ones. It's far different when you go to mix this with something. So, for instance, here's a modern high-performance pigment, a phthalo green. Probably all familiar with phthalos and how hard they are to control. Well, one thing you can do with your natural green earth colors is make something that's usable. So you wouldn't want to do a tree with that, but if you mix the burnt sienna in there, now you've tamed that green or you can put what's that yellow ochre? Oh, here it is. These are also, and a yellow ochre should be a natural yellow earth, not something else. And I'm not saying that these modern manufactured pigments are bad. They have their use, especially, say, in an underpainting, because they're so much hotter than a natural earth. Let me show you what that yellow ochre does to this phthalo green. See, so now you can create a green that you can use in a landscape or anywhere where you want to create a sense of space as well. Let me see. Get this here. I'll show you a little bit what happens when you add white to these. So here's the difference between modern synthetic earths and the nuance of a natural earth. They're really not. You can't really use one for the other. They do such entirely different things. And this is also. And I hope everyone comes up afterwards and takes a close look at these. Here's another version of the same thing going on. Instead of talking about brown earths, now I'm talking about red earths. And actually, this is what happened was in the 19th century, after the Industrial Revolution, pigment manufacturers figured out how to make earth colors or how to simulate what happens in the soil naturally over time, which is what creates natural earth colors. They figured out how to make it synthetically. So the modern Mars colors and this transparent red oxide, they're actual pure iron exposed to acid, whereas it's not. And they're more colorful and concentrated because they're missing the natural impurities of the ground. See, the dirt has a little bit of iron in it, and it becomes red over time. Or with this, we have an imported Venetian red. This comes from volcanic activity. So you have, it looks strong, but it's, so the reason you'd want to have a natural red earth is that you can use it as a flesh tone. Whereas the modern Mars reds, that will allow you to paint like a fauve, wild beast. In fact, that's what caused that whole artistic movement, is those painters gave up their natural dirt pigments. And they lived at a time when the Mars pigments were being introduced, and so their paintings were called wild beasts because they no longer had the nuance of natural earth in their work. Let me show you this real quick. Yeah, so here's and the natural earth pigments tend to be a little more transparent, and when the modern synthetic ones, starting with the Mars, are much more opaque, and then they're re-exposed to acid to make these transparent iron oxides and changes the particle size, but it's still very intense. And here's the regular Mars color. So you can see here the difference between a natural Venetian red and what would be a modern 19th century Mars red pigment. So you want to say something about, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Jon. I'm currently the paintmaker's apprentice over at Vasari. I've been doing it for about 5 years, and it's just interesting because, at first I'm just putting stuff together, and then after a few years you just pick up things, because when you're around paint, you just end up picking up so much. And I kind of lucked out with Vasari because we tend to just try to preserve the pigment itself. So, like she was showing here, a lot of these, let's see. A lot of these are just pretty much dug up straight from the ground, and we end up kind of, sorry, hold on. A lot of these pigments basically, sorry, I'm not used to so many people.
Was that the flake white?
Yeah. So I put down flake white because we kind of have a battle between us two, where titanium, for me, is a little too strong. Like, it's very rigid and cold, and when you end up mixing it, a lot of these colors, depending if you're going to mix cool or warm, you end up with dulled out mixtures. So up here you see the flake, you ended up just warming it up like perfectly, but you end up using a lot. She would.
It's so delicate.
Yeah.
And translucent.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a lead pigment, so a lot of people are worrisome about using it. But my job basically is to constantly keep up with the pigment industry. So a lot of these old colors, you just gain a deep appreciation for it because they've been used for hundreds of years from the painters that we all know and love. And there's some pigments, say like this basic red that we made a while ago. And basically, if you've used a pyrrole red, it can be, especially ours, we have a permanent bright red, and it can be like really intense because a lot of these pigments aren't used for us. They're used for like the automotive industry. Like the artists, are kind of getting left behind in the world of color because you look around, there's color everywhere. It's used for so many different applications, and we get to sample these and use them in our paint. So eventually, what I've come to learn is that the old pigments and the newer pigments, they're very like difficult to work with if you don't know what you're doing, or you don't know the pigment itself. And let's see. So we got to, have some fun, and recently, we're always coming out with new colors, because you end up with, there's a whole array of colors out there, and we're just like kind of scratch the iceberg. Like we're looking at our array of greens, and we're like, how could we possibly add a new green? And there's always a new green, there's always a new pink, there's always a new, and you can't have the whole arsenal in front of you. But, like Ellen said, or Ellen's list there, she really honed in on a few, and that created her, it created her own path, So for me, I have like my own few that I enjoy making and I enjoy using, and you end up just creating a different painting. Like you yourself can get transformed by the paint itself.
So John, you don't mind my asking a question. So you were talking about some of the newer colors, and you're keeping on top of sort of what's out there. So are you always experimenting with new colors that are coming out and seeing what would be valuable to add here?
Yeah. She basically asked if, because there's new pigments and stuff coming out all the time, and whether or not, we use them to our advantage. Because a lot of the colors out there, again, are like used for automotive, and they can be like pretty tricky. Like they're, sometimes they don't even want to be paint. So we pick and choose this based on people's needs, because a lot of the time people, like this color here was a recent one, the Lily Rose, and it's made by all like modern pigments, and you get a really bright color, and to me, a lot of those colors can be like candy when you're working. Like when I first started, I took all of our brightest colors, started putting them down, and then you end up limiting yourself, because like a lot of these older traditional colors, they have such a more nuance to them, and especially we have basically domestic earths and foreign earths, and our domestic ones are like cleaner, and they mix pretty flat, but they're sturdy. The foreign earths are my favorites that I've come to learn, because there's a larger particle size, and when you mix them, like even here, when you mix them here, you see how like this is the Mars red, and
Flake.
Yeah, this is Mars red and flake, and you get pretty streaky. It's very they're fighting with each other basically. And when you come to more of like a natural earth, it kind of just spreads, and it does its own thing, and that can be very helpful in a painting, because you could be mixing all day, and you're not really getting those edges that you want and everything, and those foreign earths just kind of, they work their own magic.
Yeah. I think another thing that, and Ellen was talking about this, talking about your burnt umber, which I squirted out here. I think one of the things that came to mind listening to you talking about that and how you feel about it is, well, thank you, because so much handling happens by the time you get the paint in your studio. Jon really takes a lot of time to put it together. Then we have another individual, Danny, who actually hand fills every tube manually. and then someone else hand makes the labels by hand and puts them on by hand. So what I'm getting to is there's all this life force by the time you get that color. And, besides the fact that we try to make it as strong as possible because we have that luxury of small batches, hand cleaning all our equipment, we're not in a rush, because we're not trying to fill a pipeline of art supplies all across America. We just sell it ourselves, and we really want to create the true standard for what some of these pigments are. So oftentimes the first thing I'll squirt out is ultramarine blue, because so many ultramarine blues have a lot of phthalo in them, because they're really not a primary blue. They're very red. It's 19th century color, so it's older technology. It's not, you don't have the phthalos coming along till the 20th. And, modern color chemistry is a great thing, but sometimes you want the older pigment, because you can see here, when you mix an ultramarine blue, because it's so red, if you mix it with a warm yellow, you're going to get what I would call broken green, which is what you might want, because it implies a sense of distance. Whereas if you're going to have a warm blue as your primary color, you need to have a cool yellow to work with it, because a cool yellow will make a green with anything. Or you could have a cool blue on your palette, and that could be something like Viridian, it could be a turquoise, it could be a phthalo blue, green shade, or something like that. And or even the phthalo green makes wonderful greens. And then you can mix a true green with any yellow, even an ochre. So I guess the reason I put this on here is just, this is our mission, to try to show our customers what the true standard for these pigments should be. We really only buy premium pigment. We buy it direct from the manufacturer, so we can match it up exactly. And for instance, our Prussian blue, which we brought, is a real Mallory blue. So this color, the same way the ultramarine only mixes to the red, but makes beautiful blacks with earths, the Prussian blue only mixes to the green. And don't try to make a neutral with this, because it won't be neutral. It's going to come out green. But this, if you want to paint like Ang, or you want to do marine paintings, the Prussian is so gorgeous because it doesn't pop like a phthalo. It's older color chemistry. In fact, this was the first, outside of the Egyptian blue frit, this goes all the way back to the early 1700s. Painters were painting with Prussian blue. And you just put white in there and it's really magical.
I have a question. Do these pigments come to you dry or wet, or how do they get delivered to your facility?
You can answer that one. Dry.
The pigments themselves? Oh,
Yeah.
they're dry.
Yeah.
Well, obviously we're going to have a Q&A, so I can talk all day about that. But yeah, they come from all over the world. Again, like how I was saying about the foreign earth pails or foreign earth colors. They're dug up in Italy, France, and it's a wonder because we have basically bags of dirt from all over the world. So yeah, they all come dry, and then we basically just mix pure linseed oil with them, flop them on the mill, and depending on the pigment itself, we have to do all sorts of things to make sure that it becomes paint. So yeah, Prussian blue, my favorite blue. I mean, it's like how I was saying, a lot of these, phthalo blue and ultramarine. Ultramarine is, delicate and, a standard staple. But Prussian blue, you just end up with just the perfect greens, and it's,
Yeah, and a Prussian blue, it's an iron blue pigment. It actually mixes and dries like an earth color. Sorry about that. I forgot I had a microphone. And so it was originally used in underpaintings as the original Payne's Gray with burnt umber. Prussian blue and burnt umber made the first Payne's Gray, and which of course is a little greenish. But anyway, here it is over here. At the top I put the flake white, which brings out more of the green, and at the bottom the titanium white. Being such a strong opaque pigment, the titanium really steps on a mixture and flattens it, creates a more abstract modern space pictorially, whereas flake white is wonderful for creating atmospheric and creating a sense of distance in a painting, and volume too. So, yeah, I think, you want to say something about Prussian?
Yeah, or the flake itself, obviously you don't have to use flake. Titanium is always, it's going to be your go-to standard. But at least for the pigments that we offer, a lot of people will come in and just, I'm surprised because my first experience was with Vasari, so I had this whole array of pigments to choose from, and people are surprised, when they're using flake or they're using zinc, or they're discovering like a pure viridian that's made of metal, and a lot of I've gotten tubes of paint from all over, and I'm just surprised because I'm not seeing the pigment that I've been making into paint. That pigment is kind of lost, and we're not really preserving it well.
Yeah. So this is what we do, and when you come to our showroom, we have all these testers that you can squirt out. We really want to educate our public as to how helpful these pigments can be. So,
can we give our friends from Vasari a round of applause?